This video is about removing the dash in a P38 Range Rover. I try to be detailed and showed all the steps. I did miss a couple. One of them is the steering wheel. So I've taken out the dash twice actually in this vehicle. One time without taking the steering wheel and the second time with. And I do recommend taking the steering wheel out. You can do it without taking the steering wheel, but more than likely you are going to scratch up the steering wheel. And to remove it, it's really not that hard. Always remove the battery before and just let the electricity run out because you are working with the airbag. Just move it to one side or the other with obviously the key inside. And it's a 25 millimeter Torx or a 30 millimeter Torx. From the back side, there's two. That'll remove the airbag. And then you can use a 19 millimeter nut to remove the steering wheel. Just make sure you mark the orientation of the steering wheel before you take it out. So after removing the bolt, so you can put it back on the splines exactly where it was. I did remove the dash to replace the heater core, not just the O-rings, but to do a full replacement. That's the reason I wanted to take the entire dash out. Hope you find this helps. So the first thing we're going to do is disconnect the battery. So I'm just going to take off the negative terminal, clear it out of the way. The reason we want to do this is we're unplugging the airbags, and best practice is to unplug the battery and make sure the electrical charge is all out of the system. First, we need to take off this piece. It has 4 protective caps hiding some Phillips head screws. Also these 2 screws, which might be broken in yours. A lot of time they break off the binnacle. Now this footwell cover needs to come off. It's held by 4 screws. Next, we're going to take out this left footrest and this side cover over the hood release. It exposes the dash. We can't take it out unless that piece is out. So it's 2 screws for the footrest, 3 bolts, then unbolted from the side, and then 1 screw releases that panel. Now we're going to work on the passenger side. We're going to take out this cover and then take out the glove box. First, take out this black cover. Next, take out the dash where it's exposed by 5 screws. To remove the glove compartment pieces, obviously I've already done this, but put a plastic pry bar underneath here and wiggle this out as best as you can. When you're taking this piece off, this wooden piece, start on this end. Pry, you're going to have to pry pretty hard, but when it comes out, this is all that's holding them in. So there's no nuts on the other end. Note on the driver's side, there's no fastener behind this trim piece. There's no reason to take that off. Now for the instrumentation. This is optional to take out the center console, but it does help free everything up and makes everything a little looser. As you can see, I've got both front seats out. It's because I'm working on another project with the front seat covers. But we'll proceed with taking the console out, and you can see where you don't have to take it fully out, but it will help bring all the pieces for the instrumentation. There is a false bottom on the center console. Just pry it out and exposes 2 bolts. Next, remove this screw and this screw. By removing these 2 bolts and these 2 screws, you can now slide the center console back just a bit to expose this joint to make this piece easier to get out. Screw that's here and here, to be able to lift up the switch plate. The emergency brake lever just comes out. It's very hard to get off the very first time with the adhesive, but once you break the adhesive, you pull it straight off. After detaching the blue plug from the switch plate, unscrew this screw so we can take off the gear shift. A short Phillips head number 2 is needed to take off the gear shift lever. Side note here, when you're reinstalling this cover for all the switches, don't worry about having all these screws if some are missing. And I would not screw this down too tightly. Let it float, because you don't want it to fight the other piece that we just took out right here. This piece will crack. So just let it float in there. 3 screws and we can take out the shifter. 8mm nut here. 4 screws on either side of the AC heater control unit. Now just remove the heater AC control, unplug everything. You can't get the wires mixed up, they only plug back in each slot. There's no way to mix them up. This time I'm going to remove the center console. You don't have to do this, but obviously it makes it easier to get it loose, but I'm going to be replacing one, so I'm going to take it out at this time. Need 2 of these radio release tools. Put them in both sides and it releases the radio. Next, we're going to remove 2 screws right here and here. You might have a couple of screws here and below. We're going to remove this cover piece over the instrument panel. Coming back over to the passenger side, we're going to take out the instrument cluster. There's 4 screws holding it in. You're going to need at least a 6-inch long Phillips head screwdriver, number 2 size. Move this air conditioner channel, whatever you want to call it. It's a little interesting. Up here, the screw is screwed in the other way. The only way to do it is kind of massage this, and you might actually have to break it off, but you can zip tie it back when you're putting it back together. So that exposes. Now we can take off the 4 screws that hold the dash on this side. Again, you do not need to take off this trim piece. So that's where we are now. We've got the radio and all the instruments out, HVAC, the control unit. Next, we're going to take out the airbag. Airbag is held in by 4 8mm nuts from underneath. One of them is a little difficult to get to, that's underneath here. Just come up from underneath and you'll find it. Next, remove the 3 vents from the dash. Just use a small prying tool, lift it up without trying to break too many of the tabs. Do the same thing on the passenger side. Remove this air conditioning vent. Staying on the passenger side, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws holding in the dash on this side. Now there are 4 8mm nuts, bolts holding in the dash. 2 on this side right behind the airbag. And now with the dash exposed, we can get to work on the heater core. To get good access, you're going to need to take out this screw, and then underneath the cowl, the screws under there, and this whole sub piece will come out. You'll have to undo some screws here also, but that'll give you complete access to everything, and that's the benefit of taking the dash out. You're going to need to take the cowl off to get to the bolts that hold on the dash support. So first, take off the windshield wipers. Just take a pick here to expose the 13mm nut. 13mm nut, loosen it up. The windshield wiper just pulls straight up. If it's the first time it's been taken off, it might take you a little bit. Just jiggle it back and forth, come on off. Next we have to take off this trim piece. You're just going to basically find a small plastic tool, put it under here, and just pry it up. It'll just pry this up, and it will come right on out. There's a series of clips that ride on this channel that go into these holes. Some of them will stay. Just take a pair of pliers, pull them out, put them back into this channel when you're putting everything back together, and they line up into these holes. Now take the 3 separate cowl pieces off. The 2 on the right have 2 screws on the top, 1 on the bottom, and the middle one's got 4 on the top, I believe 4 on the bottom that you can't see from here. Quick tip here, before putting in the dash, do not tighten up these bolts, these 2 bolts. Leave them with a lot of wiggle room, because you're going to need that when you install the dash to line up your 4 screws that actually hold the dash in. So leave these loose with some slack so you got a little adjustment on when you're lining up the dash. So once you have everything off except for the dash, it's really only held on by screws underneath the glove box and underneath the steering wheel, and 4 screws up top, and then it can be lifted out. There are some zip ties right below here holding on the wiring harness. You'll need to clip those, and there's a zip tie holding these electrical connections on. You have to cut those off to be able to bring it out, but reattachment's not necessary. I think that was more in the manufacturing to keep them out of the way. I do describe removing 2 bolts from underneath the cowl. You don't have to do that. That's really just to get access to the heater control box if you're doing some work like I was with the heater core. It will help remove the frame that actually supports the entire dash.